Okay, welcome everybody to our second edition, and that panel discussion is hosted by our gold sponsor, Deutsche Welle. So the topic today will be on new content, new focus, how Africa inspires the globe with culture and creativity. Thank you, Rovanenko, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Shanna, and a warm welcome to everybody who's here today. This topic brings me a lot of joy as I sit here on the African continent to be able to share and pick the brains of our panelists, our esteemed panelists who are here with us this morning. So we're looking forward to unpacking how Africa and how our creativity and our culture inspires the rest of the globe. So our panelists are going to speak on various elements. We're going to look at the creative individuals, right, who are looking for inspiration. We're going to look at content that's globally relevant. We're going to look at blending traditional aesthetic and modern design, and also going to look at our creative spirit as Africans, right, and how this merges with international cultures if it does. Without any further ado, we don't have a lot of time, so let's get right into the meat of it. And I'd like to start and pose my question to our gold sponsor, who's Samira. Samira is the partner for content. She's a partner content manager, and she is representing Deutsche Welle. So Samira, let's start with you, and let's get into what role tradition plays in modern design and lifestyle.
Yes, thank you, Rovanenko, and hi, everybody. If you think about tradition and the role it plays in modern design and lifestyle, I actually think it plays a big role. So at DW, that's at least the exciting thing we can observe with our European lifestyle and culture magazine called Euromax. One might assume that everything that is modern has to stand out from traditions, but the feedback from our viewers and users worldwide shows us that the topics that combine tradition and modernity are the ones that go down best. And I think that's also a great opportunity for the African continent. Africa is so rich in traditions. And when these are integrated into a modern lifestyle, for example, on the subject of fashion, but also architecture or design, then you can produce very exciting content for a global audience, I think.
Thank you, Samira. You talk about a fusion of tradition and modernity. And my question would be, are we merging tradition and modernity for each continent? Because there's African modernity, then there's European modernity. So are you saying that the fusion of African styles must be a fusion of our modern styles as well as our tradition, or African tradition together with global modernity?
Well, that's actually an interesting point. I think in both directions it could work. So I always think it's very interesting when tradition gets mixed with a modern point of view that also is from that region, from that continent, if we speak now about different regions in the world. But then again, I think it's also a way of building bridges to other continents or to a global platform. So this could, of course, and I think it also does, tradition, when it's shown on a global stage, it's also having an influence on other regions, I think.
Thank you, Samira. We'll get, I guess we'll get feedback on that point. So please, send through your feedback and any questions you might have, which we'll take at the end when we finished with our panelists. So please hold on to those questions. Where I answered my next question around what is compelling content on a global stage, and your recipe, as you've said, is that fusion of tradition and modernity. Our next panelist, if I can jump over to you, Vernon, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, Vernon is my neighbor just next door, and he's the head of broadcast for one of South Africa's biggest commercial media companies, which is Arena Holdings. All right, so you have your history in broadcast media, so a lot of television there, and really interested to hear your views on this. And I'll jump into television content, right? The world right now is inundated with cable networks, with Netflix, with everything is online, and appointment viewing and all of that. So taking away appointment viewing rather. And now what is for Africa the most challenging thing when it comes to, even for you with where you work, in terms of getting proudly African content onto the screens?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges, I'm going to be slightly obtuse here. One of the challenges is deciding what to leave out. There is so much astounding, wonderful, creative content coming out of our continent. And we work 54, 56 countries, enormous traditions, enormous design, artistic capacity and capability. And I think only now the rest of the world is picking up on this. I mean, here, locally in all our respective countries, we've known this for a very long time. And we see all around us how design is infused in our society. We live it. It's not so much a thing that you go to a gallery to look at art. Art is all around us. Art is in the way we dress. It's in the way we move. It's in our music. It's our buildings, our architecture. And, we sort of pioneered, we have a channel called the Home Channel, which is very much a design and decor channel. And it started out just literally bringing in content from around the world. We started looking at this as TV makers going, it's okay, but frankly, we can do a lot better here. So our first foray into really trying to celebrate our local design is a program we actually came up with called Africa Modern. And it's a celebration of architecture, of food, of art, of design and decor, of furniture building, and looking for the excellence within, we started out in South Africa, and we're now looking to expand that around the continent. Starting to work with various partners in various countries to bring us their, a window into their particular cities. And in turn, we want to try and get that content with ours back into Africa and onto a global stage. So that's kind of where we are seeing it. We just think there's an embarrassment of riches.
I like that. And I do like the beginning of your answer where you said it's hard to actually decide what to put on because it must become about it. Is it globally relevant? Is it commercially viable? Because I'm sure there are a lot of creators on the continent that are doing that. But what I want to get into is you talked about one of the shows you have called Africa Modern. And over the years, we've had ways where we redefine our Africanness, right? There's Afrocentric, there's Afro chic. Now there's Africa Modern. My question is, why isn't there Africa Ancient? Are we actually watching African culture literally dilute and disappear before our eyes slowly as we continue to rebrand it and continue to watch it evolve and merge with European Western cultures?
No, I'm certainly not disappearing and not going anywhere. I think if anything, it's gaining a new life. I think, everything, all cultures is a continuous, not a static thing. It's continually reinventing itself. You can see that in our cities. You can see it in the way, you can see it in politics. You can see it in, everywhere. So I think what we have is a DNA that will run through. What the future of African design and things look like, we don't know. That's up to the next generation of creative people to shape. And as Africa is more exposed to the globe, yes, we will have influences from all over, but our influence as well will spread into global design culture. And to me, that's the wonderful kind of mix and blend, and just finally Africa kind of taking its place where it should be on the world stage. And from a TV perspective, it's just wonderful to be able to tap into this content and hopefully give it as big an audience as possible.
Good, good. And still on television, you talked about the Home Channel, which a lot of us do watch for inspiration, just to feel good as well, because who doesn't like to watch aesthetically pleasing things on a screen? So my question would be with, showcasing the best of, right? And picking homes and picking people. How does that work? Because the general African is quite conservative, all right? The general African is not flashy, even though they've got so much wealth and a beautiful home, they're not big on that. So how do you navigate that one?
Well, the property shows we do, you're absolutely correct. I mean, people are private, especially wealthy people. That they don't want to be. I mean, sometimes for tax reasons and for so some illicit funds that might have gone into some of the bling. But generally, that aside, wealthy people don't want to let people into their secrets. They don't want to showcase their homes. Or not their association with the home. They certainly don't, there's worries about, kidnapping and crimes and things like that. But what we do find is people are still incredibly proud of these homes. And they're very happy for us to come in, but we can't make the association. So we would very often have a designer or the architect as the person hosting us into the home, but very, very, very rarely would you actually have the owner. But I think that's not just an African phenomenon. I think that's global. I must tell you that, I mean, apropos what you're saying, there was one very flash South African, probably a billionaire, who got his some of his wealth through ill-gotten gains, and proudly showed off his house, on television as a mansion. We're talking like a major investment. And the next minute, the Special Investigation Unit was tapping on his door and identifying objects of value that they'd seen in the TV show as things that they wanted to attach. So there is a lesson there, I think, if you are wealthy.
No, there's a very strong lesson, and you've answered me completely. Okay, here I am thinking they're just private and humble. Meanwhile, they're private and strategic. No, thank you for that, Brennan. Thank you. So now moving on to our next panelist, and still with broadcast, we're going to move to radio. Okay, because as we talk about culture and all these media platforms, radio still remains so relevant on our continent. Not going anywhere anytime soon. It's still affordable, it's still accessible, and in a lot of underdeveloped areas, it remains literally one of the only methods of entertainment. So we have Samuel, who is the CEO of City 97.3 FM and City TV, which is Ghana's most listened to English radio station and fastest growing TV channels, respectively. So Samuel, welcome to this discussion, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Good. So we highlight obviously that you are an English speaking platform, right? Predominantly. So as we talk about preserving our African culture and also that authenticity, when you have some of your Ghanaian presenters who speak maybe a multitude of your local languages, how do we maintain that magic of radio where now, Africans are forced to speak in a foreign tongue? To be fair, English is not our first language, even though we've learned it so well. There's community radios which are actually designed to let people connect in their mother tongue and have that music that just sings to the souls in the communities. So how are we preserving that with radio today?
Thanks. I think we even forget that English is a foreign language, in this part of the world. I think we rather look at it as a common platform to exchange ideas. In some parts of our sub-region, the Hausa language has done a better job at penetrating, the facets of communication. We do English, yes, but it's just because English itself is our lingua for the nation, and so we still haven't seen it as the foreign language that's invading our society. Again, radio itself hasn't changed much. It's only moved from one platform to another, and the character remains the same. Now you can find radio on your phone, radio on your tablets, radio everywhere. So the core element of radio has still remained radio. Now, is it still local relevance with global impact, or the other way around? I think that's a struggle, because we have the whole spectrum distribution has made it such a way that radio will forever remain local, because the farther you go, the more irrelevant you become. So you learn to stick to the basics, and that's what accounts for our survival. Advertising will not go beyond your border. So for instance, if I'm sitting in Accra here, programming for, say, Lagos, the station in Lagos will do a better job at that and will attract better advertising value than I would do. And so we are still stuck to doing local programming, local content. Now, I think your question is, how relevant can we be as radio at the global level? Is that correct?
Sorry, Samuel, I'd lost you briefly.
No, so I was just repeating your question, that
yes.
Whether
around the relevance. No, I think you've answered it quite thoroughly in terms of the relevance, and our local languages. And I know you've also worked a lot with even the Francophone part of Africa, which always gets marginalized in a lot of ways, and I actually feel sorry for the Francophone communities, because their culture and tradition gets only shared amongst them in a lot of ways, because where English is the predominant language on the continent, like you said, a lot of us don't even see it as a foreign language. How do we manage to get them involved and integrated integrated, because they are literally very small community, but they are only able to showcase amongst themselves. And that, for me, even when it comes to music now, we talk of radio and we talk of music, not just as the way we speak, but it's the music, it's the Niger music, it's the Mapiano music that has global relevance and made an impact. I mean, think how massive the Jerusalem Dance Challenge became because of how well music communicates with people. So those things where we ask, how do we position, right? How do we make sure that other African languages and music still make global hits and still get part of these international awards? How do we do that?
I think you rightly pointed out to Niger music and Amapiano music. And these are the two power blocks on the continent of Africa, Nigeria and South Africa. And, you know, it's tradition, it's culture, but it's also business, and there's a commercial element. Nigeria music has not succeeded just because it's Nigeria music, but Nigerians all over the place, all over the continent, also account for the consumption. Because if we go to South Africa, there's a whole host of Nigerian community. The Nigerian community there is also powerful, every African country. So the consumption element cannot be ignored. That, I mean, you Ghanaians have done this before. In the 60s and the early 70s, we had a group called Osibisa. I don't know if any of you remember that group. Osibisa. Osibisa was huge, okay? But at the time, we didn't have social media. Today, it's Nigeria and South Africa because they control economic power on the continent. And that's what I think. It's a win-win. You push, but there has to be a pull at the end to make it commercially relevant, because it's a struggle for audiences also to expand the footprint of distribution. We in Ghana, we have an emerging voice, a lady called Weala, W-I-Y-A-A-L-A. If you can check her out, super girl, but she's now on the rise. But do we have the audiences across the continent or across the globe to consume her music? And I think that's a question.
Yeah, I think you have a serious job, you know, being the CEO of a radio station in terms of defining content and what's played and who's pushed and promoting girls like Weala, you know. So I think it's a joint effort. Now you've already put her on our radar, and now we're all going to follow her on Instagram and check her out. And I guess that's how we all
won't regret it.
Well, she must thank you for this moment here, okay? Because we definitely will look her up, and that's what these platforms are for, you know. I always enjoy conferences where you literally change handles these days. You know, yes, you can give each other business cards, but it's like, oh, what's your Twitter? What's your Instagram? Where are you on LinkedIn? And we all merge like that, and that's how we blend. So it's really exciting. And you know, you speak of this Weala lady, and now we get into the African stories, right? The way that we have stereotypical narratives, and one of our narratives, which remains dominant, is that of women and girls. So we can't talk about in Africa without talking about these marginalized women and girls who in 2021, you cannot believe what we still have to go through in some parts of this continent. So Janet, I come to you now, right? And I know you're very fired up and ready for this because you're so passionate, and all the work you've been doing. You know, I'm so happy to meet you because, you know, we have shared spaces in a lot of ways, and you're on television, and you know, so basically Janet is a media personality, gender equality advocate, and her focus is on menstrual equality, right? And so as a host on television, she does both news and also just reports, you know, as an anchor. And so her experience in broadcast now will bring us to this point, because when you're doing interviews, you face to face with your guests, right? You get to experience, you have to research the journey, you have to go to the places. And I'm sure once or twice you've shed a tear. And my question now, as we talk about Africa and our continent and the narratives out there, how do we get the African stories out there properly? Okay, especially regards women and girls. It's very easy to talk about what we need and like constantly have a begging bowl out, but we lose creativity, we lose commercial value, because it's like we're always asking for, you know, assistance. We got to fight, we need our equality, all of that. So how do we get the story out but still bring entertainment value?
All right, great question. Thank you, Riveneko, and you know, for the incredible work you're doing. And I came in flustered, so I forgot to say hello to my fellow panelists. My apologies for that. But yes, my background as a broadcast journalist did bring me face to face with a lot of these issues. And the one that was a huge trigger for me was on menstrual inequality. And I like the question you've asked because, you know, much like myself, I look at myself as well, and I think there's so many layers to our stories. We are not one-dimensional. We're not only the people who need intervention and need an extension of services. That is, however, sadly, a reality for many. But now with the digital space, I know we're talking about mainstream, which is still the most powerful tool right now. We cannot argue with it, even on the continent. We are obviously seeing this massive digital boom. And I think what we've been able to do, what my foundation was then able to do, was tell these stories in a way that gives women and girls their validation, their authenticity, and it's not one-dimensional. You're not talking about Lucy, who comes from an impoverished background, who needs access to menstrual pads. That is her reality. That's the reality of many. But Lucy also has her dreams and her goals and her aspirations, and she wants to tap into her creativity. She wants to tap into the ability to have agency and speak out there. A lot of them want to also tap into this almost inevitable authenticity and rhythm we have around culture and creativity and fashion. And so the best thing to do is to allow girls and women to tell their own stories. I wrote a book called My First Time. And the reason I was inspired to do that is because I felt like our stories were being told a lot for us. And that's fine, we appreciate it. But we can tell our own stories. And the more we invite them to share stories, the more we're invited to share our truth and the different aspects to us, the richer the conversations and the richer the content. And so the book was really about a celebration of Kenyans, and the second volume is Africans, which I've broadened it to stories across Africa. But it also combined, it was around a subject that's difficult, reproductive health and rights, agency and in access to menstrual products. But there was also color, there was also demographics, there was also religion and culture, and infusing all that to say, let us tell our stories. And storytelling, it can be through art, can be through poetry, through YouTube, Instagram. I love Instagram. It's the biggest platform I have. And all that is just our stories. Me talking here, this is me telling my story just as much as another girl or woman out there. So let's allow for people to share their own stories and their own truth and allow them to weave into kind of like the broader discussions that we have as well, because we're not one-dimensional.
Thank you for that, Janet. And as we talk about our authentic voice and telling our own story, we look at the platforms we all have now. In Zimbabwe, particularly, well, this part of Africa, we predominantly have DSTV. And of course, now access to Netflix. Some people are on Amazon Prime, but you know, we've got those platforms. And my question is, what is the African dream, right? We watch so much television and so much content that literally has taught us what the American dream is, right? There's songs about it. Go to New York, where concrete jungles and where dreams are made of. But my question is, when we talk of Africa, in our storytelling, what is the African dream? We're not, besides desert and safaris and, you know, coming to see animals and making Africa a beautiful tourist destination. What is the African story? What is the African dream?
Yeah, that's really powerful. I do think we've come a long way in terms of being able to be proud about what it means to be African in different dimensions. The African dream is what, I don't know, it's what Eliud Kipchoge is living. He's living a dream to reach, to kind of tap into this talent that has opened him up to the world. The African dream is reflective of what some of our leaders and entertainers and artists are putting out to the world. And again, it goes back to our identity. There's been a very big issue with identity in Africa for many years. And I love what Samuel has said about this girl who is kind of speaking and saying things that are proudly Ghanaian. I feel like we have come full circle to be able to say, we're putting our truth out there, and our dream is essentially our identity, our stories, and what it is we're able to achieve. The African dream is essentially us being able to live our most authentic truth, put that out in the world and have people embrace that. And we've seen that. We've seen it, whether it's in the Academy Awards with Lupita, whether it's in athletics, whether it's with Niger music and Amapiano. That is the African dream. It's tapping into our talent, our intrinsic talent, putting it out in the world. And for the first time, I think in a very long time, having the world say, we see you and we love it. Because I think for many years, there was a battle of identity within ourselves, where Wangari Maathai would win a Nobel Peace Prize. That was a dream, but people were kind of trying to reconcile it. The global world got it. We didn't really get it. But now I feel like we've come full circle to say we're putting out our truth and our stories and authenticity. And people applauding that and appreciating that is giving people the kind of like the gravitas to do it even more. Our African dream is our story and our truth and authenticity, putting it out in the world and embracing it in equal measure. That's what I think. I don't know if, I'm sure everyone else has an answer as well, but that's what I see and that's what I feel.
Yeah. No, good. Thank you for that. And I think that question really is a lot of food for thought, right? Like you said, when we look at global stage and we say the Wangari Maathais, like you talked about, the Chimamandas, we are sitting here in Africa like, wow, she wrote a book and she's out there, like now she's, you know, so sometimes you think about how simple it is to be able to do that and put our voice out there and put our stories out there, but not enough people are doing it, right? Now we talk of the African dream and we cannot, this is debatable, but from where I'm sitting, the African dream was sold for us, I think it was 3 years ago with the Black Panther movie, all right? A lot of people were asking, what is it? Is that a real place? You know, is there a Wakanda? I mean, it's crazy. And you think of The Lion King as well, which is one of the most popular movies based on Africa. Then they did a remake of it and you got people talking like this, you know, and it's so weird how our Africanness and the best parts of us get redefined, remodeled by other societies and other communities because they have the means to do it, right? So we sometimes get bullied off our own stage. So now we're opening this conversation up to everybody who is on our session and also to our panelists. Let's feel free now to have a bit of a back and forth. I think as an introduction and in your respective spaces, we have sort of set the tone. And in our last sort of 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, we'd like to engage with our questions that I can see there on the chat. So we've got a couple of those. Like I said, a lot of it is food for thought, but we do we're taking questions as well as comments, you know, and I dare anybody to even bring some poetry, okay? So let's get to our chat box now here and just go through some of the questions. And please, can each of the panelists feel free to answer it if you know it's specifically relevant to your sphere, right? So let's start here. There is a comment here from, okay, a question rather, okay? Good morning from Nairobi. Where does the African creative entrepreneur readily access business skills training in their area of business? So this is more capacity building, you know, I know I've got this skill, where do I go to channel it, to nurture it and make it commercially viable? Do we have enough of those spaces?
I could just jump in real quick, although I think the people on this space are superb experts at that, but yeah. I can try and throw in my 2 cents. What's the lowest hanging fruit you have to put your skill out there? I think let's not ignore, again, the power of a global platform on the digital space. Capacity building exists. I think a lot of media houses have trainings. A lot of them put out information. I think there's a lot of people who are consulting on the same. The gap is what exists. People say, I hear about these platforms, how can I reach them? It's right in front of you. I think it's on your digital space. It's asking creatives who've kind of advanced and asking them how they were able to navigate. So I would say the one thing is reach out to people who've already kind of been in the space for a while. But also, if you're trying to enhance your capacity, put it to the test and start using the digital platforms to amplify the work you're doing and use that to kind of build your way up and navigate your way through spaces that can allow you to strengthen your skills a little bit more. That's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Janet. Hope you answered from Nairobi there. And then we'd like to acknowledge the CEO of KCBS Television in Cameroon. Bonjour, ça va? Welcome. Thanks for joining. That's nice to know that we've got representation everywhere. And then now another question, right? What are the main differences between content consumed in East, West, or Southern Africa? Some people think it's a one-size-fit when it is not due to the unique culture, language, history, or colonial background.
Sure. Let me take a stab at that.
Thanks, Ben.
You know, it's sure there's common content. I mean, I think you spoke about the Hollywood, the Americanization of, in fact, the Disneyfication of, of Africa and whatever, and also I guess the imperialism of just US content, which dominates on a world platform, and there's always going to be highly consumed by anyone, anywhere. It's just a fact of life. But I think what we're seeing, certainly in the territories that I've worked in, which would be Kenya, Ghana, and South Africa, an incredible upswell in local content, telling local stories. And often, so instead of watching The Bold and the Beautiful, which would have been standard fare for 20 years across things, we now developed our own soap operas and telenovelas and that. And yeah, I mean, that's not perhaps the height of creative arts and whatever, but it's at least contextualizing and putting local faces, local stories, it's making it feel real. And each of, whether you're in East Africa, West Africa, or South Africa, you're going to have different flavors of that because your stories are going to be different. Yes, there are the universal truths of, I don't know, you love someone, they break up, they get married, they have to, whatever. But it's the local contextualization, taking into account the local cultures, the language, the scenery, and all that kind of starting to make our content real and relevant to us. And I think seeing ourselves reflected on our own screens, in our own languages, in our own spaces, it's a huge thing. It says, we don't have to import all the stuff anymore. And that, I think, has major resonance throughout society in terms of affirming ourselves as these are our stories. It's like coming back to Jana's point. This is our narrative. We own it. And now we're seeing it ourselves kind of equally. And I think that then reflects through like the stuff we're doing with the culture and the design and the art and that. It's now, yes, there might be local stories, but they're told as if they are global stories.
I do like that. And you're right, seeing ourselves on the screens and our own stories is it's liberating and it gives you pride, And I think underlying when this question was asked, there was there's a perception that there is a one size fits. But I think when it comes to narratives, you can never overdo a love story, right? You could never overdo family dynamics. No matter what color the people are on the screen, there's always like a dysfunctional family. There's so many layers and tiers and so many common denominators all over the world, to be very honest. So let's get into another question here. This is directed to you, Sam, specifically. Samuel, the question is, what do you think the media and cultural organizations in Ghana can do to promote artists like Weala?
I think, again, one of the emerging trends in our distribution system is social media. I mean, that goes beyond borders. The likes of Weala, who are, if you like, authentic African, an authentic African missionary, I'll put it that way, fits into this space. And before we're talking about the African dream, I struggle to figure out what this African dream is about. I know about the African ideal, which spreads across different parts of Africa. Marriage is the same process in West Africa, in East Africa, and Southern Africa. Processing food is the same in these parts of. So the ideal has to be packaged in a better way. And I think the likes of Weala fits into this space, and it helps the uniqueness of their character, helps for the promotion because it's unique. You don't succeed in promoting from Africa what is already trending in the Western world because you get lost, you get missing. And that's why it's easier for us. So in Ghana, what we do is that we kind of promote anything and everything Weala for most of the English-speaking radio stations. But she also does a good job at doing her tours in Europe and in some parts of Africa. And we like to see more of her kind because she's taken after the fellas of this world. Of course, she doesn't do political music, but the uniqueness of her talent is what we celebrate. And you find such people in Kenya, in South Africa, and in all the other parts of the continent. So we do our best, and social media can also help break the barriers of their distribution.
So it's evident that social media is something we can't deny. I feel like it needs to be plugged into even high school curricula because it's become such an important part of life and communication. And the Gen Z, the Generation Zs are coming up and they're teaching us how we have to also diversify how we present content and our creativity. Things have to be shorter and generally cooler, or else they're not going to sit there for hours and hours to watch something. So even the way people consume content has changed so much. I want to come to you, Samira, with this other question that's here. And we had talked about it with you in the very beginning, but it's easy to talk about broadcast and get carried away because a lot of us have that background. But we are also here to talk about culture and art itself. So the question here that comes, and it's very technical, and I hope you can give a more detailed response to them. They say, what methods do you think can be used for the fusion of traditional and modern ways of creative expression?
Yes, well, I think first of all, the good answer is just let the creatives speak for themselves. They will do the job, the most important one, as we heard before, and I totally agree. The personal stories are the stories people get inspired by and people want to listen to. And then I think an important method is just to think always when you have a story, what can the viewer or the user learn from the story? And I think this is also a very important point when we look at the different regions of the world. So here we can learn so much from each other because there are so many different perspectives on cultural topics, if we want to stay in these backgrounds. And so this is for us, for DW as an international broadcaster, this is always a very interesting thing to bring these different perspectives together. And the best way to do that is, of course, to work with partners from the region, because that's where the regional expertise is. So yeah, I think it's very exciting and a very exciting topic to discover culture together.
Thank you. Thank you, Samira. So in our last 3 minutes, I'm going to ask our other three panelists to shoot their parting shot in 60 seconds each. We just summarize really what we've discussed here today. If our ladies first, I'll start with Janet. If you could give us your summary.
All right, thank you so much, Ruvenek. I'll try my best. I think, again, it's just going back to allowing us to live our most honest truths to the world and also to validate Africans to do the same. I know when I put out this question earlier on, people said as creatives, as content creators, we still feel like there's a huge gap between what we're doing and how the world is embracing it. So we do need to kind of listen in on that and find ways to open up those channels. But secondly, I think we need to let people tell their stories. We need to stop dominating and kind of planting seeds of doubt that your story doesn't matter or your story doesn't make sense. Your story is yours. It's unique. And for a long time, we've not been able to see our stories reflected authentically. I'm really glad that's changing. Even I feel happy now to be able to watch stories that I can resonate with. It's not to say the rest I can't. It's just good to see authentic stories that are speaking to me. You know, as an African woman, as a creative, as a content creator, as a broadcaster, it's just great to see that reflected and enhanced. So let's continue to allow people to put out their stories, guide them on how best they can make it interesting, make it engaging, and allow the narratives to speak for themselves. And thank you so much for this platform and for just moderating this so wonderfully, Ruveneko.
Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you. And over to you now, Samuel.
I think it's been wonderful. We should be having such conversation more often. Thing is, we've had a DSTV trying to put and package our stories together. Any other opportunities to kind of continue from there? If today, touch wood, DSTV should go bust, what happens to the African story? Should it be the CNN version, the BBC version? That's what we grew up knowing, but that should change, and that's what we are here for.
Thank you so much. I like that. Vernon.
Sorry, I think I was on mute. Yeah, just to echo some of the sentiments. I mean, I think the time is right. I don't believe the world has moved on. Africa is, you know, whether it's because they're sticking us into Disney-like movies or whatever, we flavor of the month. I mean, our designers are winning prizes all over the world. Our music, you know, KG's Jerusalem, it took the world by storm. You've got African museum art curators running some of the major galleries in Europe. I mean, the world is open. It's open for Africa. We are now on the map, and we must go out, take advantage, showcase our stuff with pride, tell our stories with pride, use whatever media. Yes, DSTV dominates broadcast, and they've been wonderful at creating opportunities. But everyone's alluding to social media is huge. It's your instant platform to the entire globe. So I think the time is now. Get our stories out, be proud of them. They are us. They compete equally with everyone in any form, in any platform in the world.
Thank you very much, our esteemed panelists. Thank you for your time and sharing your wisdom and your experience with us on this discussion. Thank you to Deutsche Welle as the gold sponsor for this discussion. Really appreciate this, and honored also to have been part of this kind of discussion. So here's to pushing more of our own content and keeping it as African as we possibly can. So thank you very, very much. That's it for me.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Be good, okay? If you can't be good, be safe.